If you are interested in upgrading your Powermatic 54A 6-inch joiner from a straight knife cutter head to a helical one, then this is the video for which you have been searching. I'm going to demonstrate what you need to do to perform this somewhat tricky task. There are several steps to complete, so make sure you set aside a couple hours to dedicate to this project. I am far from an expert on this subject, and it took me 2 hours to complete start to finish. I will break down each step along the way and try to keep everything as simple as possible to understand. Let's get started. Before we jump right in, there are 2 items we need to discuss. Number 1, what helical head you are going to be using, and number 2, what tools do you need to perform this upgrade. I purchased my replacement helical cutter head from Bird Tool. It should be noted that they offer 2 different diameter cutter heads since Powermatic changed the size of the 54A's cutter head over the years. Older models should use the G6 cutter head, and newer models should use the G6-63 model. To determine which model you should be using, you need to measure the diameter of your straight knife cutter head. Bird Tool gives a great explanation on how to do this, so I will not waste your time showing it. However, I will leave a link in the description to their site if you would like to check it out. There are several tools that we are going to need to perform this upgrade. The tools that I used are as follows: a 3 and 8mm hex wrench, 3/8 inch socket with a ratchet, 12mm and 14mm wrenches, Phillips screwdrivers. I recommend a small and large one, rubber mallet, hammer, bearing pullers, box cutter, angle grinder, and an adjustable wrench. Having a second person to help raise and lower the jointer is recommended as well. I unfortunately did not have this luxury. I made it work, but it was not easy. This jointer is very heavy. With that out of the way, we can start disassembling the machine. Ensure the jointer is disconnected from a power source before touching anything. The cutter head guard is the first step in the disassembly process. There is a screw near the bottom of the shaft connected to the guard that must be removed. Once removed, you can rotate the silver cylinder at the bottom of the guard shaft to release the guard tension. Simply pull up to remove the guard. The jointer fence assembly will need to be removed next. There are 2 bolts that will need loosened at the back of the joiner to complete this task. The 8mm hex wrench will be used here. Please note that you do not need to remove the bolts, only loosen them. Once loosened, the fence can be lifted off the jointer wings. The fence is fairly heavy, keep this in mind when you try to remove it. The motor belt cover will need to be removed next. It is located on the back of the machine. There are 4 screws that hold it into place. Remove the screws with a large Phillips screwdriver. Remove the belt guard and place it and the screws in a safe place for later. The dust collector chute cover needs to be removed now. There are also 4 screws holding it in place. Remove the screws with a Phillips head screwdriver, then remove the chute cover. Place these to the side out of the way. The back motor cover gets removed next by turning the black knob near the top of the cover. Set the cover to the side and vacuum out any sawdust shavings inside the unit. The next step in the process is to remove the motor belt. In order to accomplish this, you will need access to 4 bolts that mount the motor to the jointer. The easiest way to access these bolts is to lower the jointer onto its back. I performed this task by myself, but I strongly recommend getting someone else to help you with this. This jointer weighs several hundred pounds and could easily hurt you if you cannot maintain control over it while lowering it. Do as I say and not as I do, please. Once the joiner is on its back, you can begin loosening the 4 bolts around the motor. A 12mm wrench and a 12mm socket and ratchet make this job much easier to perform. This step can be a bit awkward and tedious since the bolts and heads are not easy to access. I found that using the ratchet inside the dust chute to hold the bolt heads in place while manipulating the other end of the bolt near the motor with the 12mm wrench worked best for me. With all 4 bolts loose, push the motor assembly up towards the top of the joiner to remove the tension on the belt. The belt should slip off easily now. You will need to raise the joiner back onto its feet again. This is significantly more difficult than lowering it was. Once again, get someone to help you with this lift. It is very heavy. Now we have to remove the blades from the cutter head. You will need the 3mm hex wrench for this task. There are 4 bolts holding each blade to the cutter head. Remove each one and the blades and set them aside in a safe place. There are 3 blades that need to be removed in total. Before the cutter head assembly can be removed, 2 bolts holding the bearing caps in place must be uninstalled. This step is arguably the most tedious and frustrating in the whole process, especially when reinstalling them. I found the front bolt to be exceptionally frustrating. The 14mm wrench will be used for this step. Access to these bolts can be found at the front and rear of the jointer. There is a small slot that is used to loosen and tighten them, which is why this step can be so frustratingly annoying. Once you loosen the bolts enough with the wrench, you can remove them through the dust chute access port. I highly recommend leaving the front bolt in place to make reassembly easier later. You may now remove the old cutter head. Pat yourself on the back. We are practically halfway done with this project. With the old cutter head removed, we can start the process of removing the pulley and bearing caps from it. There are 2 set screws connecting the belt pulley to the cutter head shaft. Loosen these screws with a 3mm hex wrench and remove the pulley and keyway. Pay attention to the pulley orientation as well as how much keyway is exposed when assembled. Now we need to remove the bearing caps. I'm certain there are multiple ways to do this, but I found bearing pullers to be the easiest. You can pick up some 3-prong pullers at Tractor Supply for around $50. Well worth it in my opinion. As you can see, they made this step extremely easy. With the caps and pulley removed from the old cutter head, we can begin assembling them on the new cutter head. It was at this point that I encountered a fairly large problem. Despite my efforts, I could not get the pulley to properly attach to the new cutter head shaft. It turns out that the keyway does not fit the new cutter head. It is too thick. There are a few ways around this problem. Number 1, buy a keyway that actually fits. Number 2, grind down the keyway with a bench grinder. Or number 3, do something sketchy with an angle grinder since you do not own a bench grinder. I bet you cannot guess which option I chose. Once again, do as I say and not as I do. I do not recommend doing what I did to make this keyway work. But after a little redneck ingenuity, I was finally able to get the pulley assembled onto the shaft. If you have made it this far, then you already have the skills necessary to finish this project. We just have to do everything in reverse now. I did take the time to scrape away any buildup around the cutter head opening between the jointer wings before installing the helical head. It seemed like a good time to perform a little maintenance since I had access. After that, I pushed the helical head into position and began the tedious process of reinstalling the bearing cap bolts. I started with the front bolt since I knew it would be the hardest. Doing it first provided me the most wiggle room for installation. Once aligned and in place, I screwed in the back bolt. This step is a royal pain in the butt, so mentally prepare yourself. Be patient and you will get it. With that done, we have to lower the jointer on its back again. Place the motor belt on the pulleys and move the motor down toward the bottom of the jointer to provide tension. Tighten the 4 bolts around the motor to hold it into place. Raise the jointer back onto its base. Test the tension of the pulley and make sure everything is aligned and spins properly. Reattach the back motor cover, and reinstall the dust collector chute cover. Reattach the belt guard in the back of the joiner. Next, reassemble the fence and tighten the 2 bolts that hold it in place. You may have to use the mallet to tap everything into alignment as you tighten the bolts. I know I did. Finally, assemble the cutter head guard and tighten the screw at the bottom to secure it in place. Installation is practically complete. The only thing left to do is align the outfeed table to the cutter head. I recommend adjusting the outfeed table up or down until it is level with the highest point of the cutter head carbide blade nearest the fence. I used a straight edge to align them. And now you have a fully upgraded Powermatic 54A with a helical cutter head. It was a long and sometimes frustrating journey, but we succeeded in the end. If you have any questions or tips to improve this project, leave me a comment down below. I appreciate your engagement. Have fun with your new Cutterhead. See ya.